The galaxy had long forgotten that humanity once stood tall on their blue world. The species that once dreamed of the stars had been broken and scattered across alien markets where they were sold as laborers' pets and test subjects to cruel hands. Their bodies were seen as weak, their minds considered fragile, and the great empires mocked them, calling them prey, children of a dead world who would never rise again for centuries. This belief had hardened until the very word human became a joke, whispered in alien taverns yet far away in the silent corners of forgotten space where wrecked ships drifted and shadows ruled. There was a sound, a whisper that not all of humanity was gone, that somewhere in the ashes something still breathed, and waited in chains under the green light of an alien moon. A group of humans bent their heads not in prayer, but in quiet rage. They had been slaves too long, beaten for mistakes, starved to prove obedience. Their alien masters laughed when they stumbled and called them fragile. But inside those tired eyes a fire burned, a memory of Earth, a memory of skies filled with freedom and voices that once roared with defiance. One of them, a man named Kale, who had spent his life carrying heavy loads. For creatures twice his size had learned to hide his strength. He had waited, watched and planned. The aliens thought humans were soft, but Kale remembered the stories his father told in whispers about wars that shook mountains, about ships that once guarded Earth. And he carried those words like weapons one night, when their guards drank and mocked the caged humans. Kale moved. He cut a wire with a stolen shard of metal. The cage door opened, and for the first time in years, free air touched his face. He looked back at his people. Their eyes widened in shock, but he only nodded and said in a voice hard and sharp, "Come with me or die in this cage." They followed because deep down they wanted to believe, and so began the first strike of the forgotten race. They crept through the alien outpost, silent as shadows, every step a risk, every sound a possible death. The aliens never expected prey to fight back, and so when Kale plunged the shard into the first guard's throat, the sound of choking fear filled the night. The humans took their weapons awkward at first, but instinct guided them. Hands that had built machines of war long ago remembered how to kill. The outpost burned within an hour, and for the first time in centuries, alien blood stained human hands. As dawn came, the survivors stood over the smoldering ruins, breathing heavy with victory and terror. What they had done was madness, but it was also freedom. They did not know where to go. They did not know what hunted them next. But they knew one thing: they were no longer slaves. That night, Kale sat on a broken wall, staring at the stars one by one. His people gathered around him, their eyes no longer filled with defeat, but with a dangerous light. He told them of the old records hidden deep in abandoned satellites of Earth's forgotten fleets. Left drifting in silence, they could find them. He said they could awaken the strength their ancestors once had. His voice shook with passion as he spoke of humanity not as prey, but as warriors. The others listened, hungry for hope. Their chains lay broken at their feet, but far across the galaxy, rumors began to spread. The outpost was gone, and whispers told of humans fighting back, small whispers yet dangerous, for fear travels faster than truth won. Alien trader swore he saw a group of humans armed with stolen rifles moving through the shadows. Another claimed a patrol ship had been hijacked by desperate slaves. But no one believed him. Not yet. The great empires laughed at the thought of prey rising against hunters, but deep down a few began to wonder, what if it was true? What if humanity was not finished? The fire had been lit, and though it was small, it burned with something the galaxy had not seen in centuries: defiance. And in Kyle's eyes, as he stared at the stars, there was a cold promise: one day the hunters would know fear, and the prey would return as the nightmare of the galaxy. The news of the destroyed outpost traveled faster than light across the trade lanes, but most dismissed it as rumor. Nothing more than pirates or a small rebellion quickly crushed. Yet those who had been close, those who saw the burned remains, whispered a different story. They spoke of humans rising of prey that struck back the galaxy, laughed at the thought, but laughter was always a mask for fear, and in hidden corners, powerful rulers began to take notice. Meanwhile, Kyle and his people moved like ghosts from world to world, avoiding patrols, raiding supply depots, leaving only ashes behind. Each step they took was survival, but each victory whispered to them that survival was no longer enough. Something larger was awakening within them, a hunger not just to live, but to fight back. Kyle felt it in his bones, and it terrified him as much as it thrilled him, for he knew that once the galaxy realized humans were not broken, the storm would come to kill them all. But he also knew they had no other choice. One night on a frozen moon, where their stolen ship lay hidden, Kale gathered his people around a weak fire, their faces tired but glowing with the strange light of freedom. He told them of the stories of old fleets of warships buried in the silence of forgotten space wrecks, perhaps but still human. He said, if they could find them, they could build again. Weapon ships power that would make the galaxy tremble. Some doubted, some were afraid, but when he looked into their eyes, he saw the spark he needed. They wanted to believe. And so the hunt for their lost past began. The humans stole maps from traders. They hacked into old archives. They searched the edges of known space until finally they found a trail. A broken signal coming from a system abandoned after a great war. Centuries ago, the signal was weak, but it carried something no alien language could mimic: the voice of Earth. Kale ordered them to follow, and though fear gnawed at them, they obeyed. The journey was long. Their stolen ship creaked and rattled. Every shadow felt like a predator waiting. To strike, they fought off patrols, narrowly escaping destruction more than once, but each battle hardened them. Hands that once trembled grew steady. Eyes that once darted in fear learned to stare into danger. Kyle watched them change and felt pride. Where there was once chains, there were now weapons. Where there was once silence, there was now defiance. And yet he could not shake the thought that they were walking into something greater than themselves. When they arrived at the dead system, it was like stepping into a graveyard. Broken hulks of ships floated in eternal silence, their metal bodies scarred from battles long forgotten. The humans stared wide-eyed, some with tears, for it was proof their ancestors had been warriors, not prey. Their blood carried this legacy, and now it called to them. Kale led the way onto one of the massive wrecks, its dark halls echoing with the ghosts of war. They searched through rust and ash until they found it, a core still pulsing weakly, still alive. Against all odds, the ancient warship had not died. It had only slept. Kale placed his hand against the flickering console, and for a moment he imagined he could feel the heartbeat of Earth itself. The ship spoke in broken tones. Systems offline, crew. Not detected, but beneath the damage it waited, waiting for hands, human hands, to command it again. The people worked day and night, learning from fragments of old code, repairing what they could, scavenging from wrecks around them with every piece. They restored. The ship's heart grew stronger. Lights flickered, engines groaned back to life, and when the first cannon hummed with power, a silence fell over them. It was as if their ancestors had returned. The prey was gone. In its place, a predator was awakening across the galaxy. Whispers grew louder. Alien hunters began to vanish. Patrols failed to return, and still the rulers laughed, claiming it was nothing but chaos. But fear began to spread faster than orders. Kale stood on the bridge of the half-restored warship, his hands gripping the console as the stars spread before him. He was no longer just a slave. He was commander of a ghost reborn. His people stood ready around him, weapons in hand, hope burning in their eyes. He looked at them and said softly, "We were prey, but now they will learn to fear us." And in that moment, the war that would change the galaxy forever had truly begun. The first test of the warship came sooner than Kale expected for. As the humans labored within the ancient hull, piecing together its heart and bones, a fleet of alien raiders arrived, hunting whispers of survivors. Kale saw them on the sensors sharp. Fanged ships, moving like wolves toward the graveyard of human wrecks. His people froze, some clutching weapons, others whispering prayers. But Kale's voice cut through their fear. He told them, this was the moment. This was where they proved they were no longer prey. He ordered power to the cannons, and though the ship was half alive, wounded, and incomplete, it roared as if it remembered what it had once been. The raiders closed in, confident they were about to crush weak scavengers, but the humans fired first. A blast of light tore through the void, ripping one raider apart before the others even had time to react. Panic rippled through the alien fleet. They had expected slaves hiding in shadows, not warriors piloting a beast from another age. Kale did not let them recover. He commanded strike after strike, the humans moving as one. Their fear burned away by the fire of survival. The warship shuttered engines, struggling shields, barely holding, but it kept fighting, and with each victory, scream of the cannons. Kale felt something awakening deep in his chest. It was not just survival. It was vengeance. It was rage. Centuries of chains poured into every shot until the void was filled with burning wrecks when the last raider turned to flee. Kale ordered silence. He let it go, for the message was already written across the stars. Humans were not gone. Humans fought back. The crew cheered. Some wept, others laughed wildly, their voices echoing through the broken ship for the first time. They had faced the galaxy not as victims, but as predators, and they had won. But Kyle did not celebrate. His eyes stayed locked on the stars. He knew the raiders would not stay silent. They would speak, and when they did, the rulers of the galaxy would hear the storm would come, and they had only just begun preparing. Over the next weeks, the humans dug deeper into the wreckage, salvaging weapons engines armor. The ship slowly became whole again, and as it grew, so did its crewmen and women who had, once hidden in caves and shadows, now stood proud on its decks, training, learning, fighting. Kale drilled them harder than ever, for he knew that victory brought danger as surely as defeat. One night, when the stars outside were quiet, a scout ship stumbled into their system. Small, fast-armed, Kale did not order it destroyed. Instead, he had it captured. Inside was a single alien prisoner, trembling under the weight of human eyes. The crew wanted to kill it to make an example, but Kale had another plan. He demanded answers. Who had sent it? What did they know? The alien tried to lie, but under Kale's cold gaze, its words broke. It spoke of fear spreading across the sectors, of whispers of ghosts in old human ships, of a war fleet that should not exist. The rulers had begun to take notice. Kale listened, and then he released the alien unharmed. His people did not understand, but Kale told them the truth. Sometimes fear was a greater weapon than fire. Let it return with its story. Let the galaxy wonder. Let them lose sleep over shadows. Soon every patrol would see a ghost in the dark. Every ruler would question their safety. It was a war of minds before it was a war of guns, and Kale knew they had to win. Both. Still the repairs continued. Engines sang brighter, shields glowed stronger, weapons lined the hull like teeth. The humans moved with discipline, their broken lives now rebuilt into a single purpose. The galaxy thought of them as prey, but Kale knew better. And now so did his people yet. Even as the warship grew whole, Kale felt unease. It was not enough. One ship, no matter how strong, could not stand against empires. They needed more. They needed a fleet. And so Kale ordered them to search deeper through the graveyard to awaken what remained. Days later, a signal echoed back, faint, almost dead, but alive, another warship sleeping in the ruins. Hope surged through the crew as they prepared to bring it back, but Kale's heart grew heavy, for he knew that with every awakening, the noise they made would grow louder. Soon, The galaxy would no longer just fear whispers. It would come with fire to silence them forever. But Kale looked into the eyes of his people, and he could not turn back. They were ready for war. They were ready to show the stars that humanity was no one's prey anymore. And as the second ship stirred awake, the night of the galaxy grew darker, for a nightmare was beginning to rise. The second ship was not like the first. Its bones were more broken, its heart weaker, but when Kale's crew touched its cold frame with their hands and voices, it answered like a giant stirring from a long-forgotten dream. Its engines coughed, its lights flickered, and then it roared alive. The crew cheered louder than they ever had, for now they were no longer alone in the dark. They were a force. Two predators side by side, Kyle walked its halls, running his hand across the rust and scars, imagining what it once was, a warship that had fought until the end, bleeding into the void, but refusing to die now. It would fight again. The humans worked day and night, moving between the two ships, repairing welding training until their hands bled and their voices cracked still. They did not stop, for they felt time pressing. On them, Kyle pushed harder than ever, his orders sharp, his eyes colder. He knew the galaxy was watching already, whispers spreading faster than light. He knew they had little time before whispers became truth, before truth became war one evening as the crew ate in silence. A sound broke through the void, a coded signal, alien, not random, deliberate. It was not aimed at them, it was sent to others. Kale ordered it, traced his crew, followed the signal with sharp hands and focused eyes until they found the source, a hidden beacon, pulsing from deep inside the wreckage graveyard. Someone had placed it there long ago, waiting to expose survivors. Kale's chest tightened. It was not raiders this time. It was scouts from the empires, and where scouts went, fleets followed. He gave the order: destroy the beacon before its call reached too far. The cannons lit up fire, swallowing the hidden device, tearing it to dust, but Kale knew it was too late. The signal had already gone out, and now the stars would burn within days. More scouts appeared, circling at a distance, too cautious to attack, too curious to leave. Kale let them watch, knowing that every moment they saw the humans training, rebuilding, fighting, was another moment the galaxy's fear grew. He wanted them to see. Wanted them to carry stories home of humans not hiding but preparing. The scouts did not engage, and eventually they left, slipping into the void. Kale's second in command, a woman with sharp eyes named Aaron, asked him why he did not destroy them when he had the chance. Kale answered with a low voice, because fear spreads faster when it survives. A dead scout tells no stories, but a living one becomes a shadow that haunts every ruler, every soldier, every planet. Aaron said nothing, but her eyes burned with respect. The crew listened too, and for the first time, they began to believe not just in survival, but in something greater: destiny. Weeks later, the scouts returned, but not alone. This time, they brought warships, larger than the humans. Heavier armored, confident. Kale stood on the bridge as they approached his crew, waiting their breaths. Tight, the enemy sent a message: surrender or be destroyed. Kale smiled without warmth and gave his answer through fire. The two human ships leapt forward, engines screaming, cannons blazing. The void erupted in light. The first enemy ship fell fast, its shields unprepared for the fury of human rage. The others fought harder, their weapons biting into the humans' hulls, tearing metal, burning decks. Still the crew held on, refusing to break. Kyle shouted commands, his voice steady, even as the ship shook under impact. Aaron led teams to repair breaches with fire and grit, turning despair into fuel one by one. The enemy ships cracked under the relentless storm, and when the last one exploded, Kale did not cheer. He stared at the wreckage floating silent across the void. The crew cheered without him, their voices filled with a new sound, not fear, not survival, but pride. For they had fought an empire's teeth and lived. Kyle knew what would follow. Word would spread like blood in water. Soon fleets far larger would come, armies driven by hatred and fear. But he also knew that fear was already winning across the stars. Rulers who once ignored humanity would begin to prepare soldiers who once mocked them, would begin to whisper the name of humans like a curse. Kale walked to the viewing deck and gazed at the endless black sky, his reflection staring back cold, unbroken. He whispered to himself that this was only the beginning, for they were no longer prey, they were no longer forgotten. They had drawn blood, and the galaxy would never forget it. But deep in his chest, Kyle felt the weight of what was coming. He knew wars did not just burn enemies, they consumed those who fought them too, and yet he also knew there was no turning back. They had woken something older and stronger than fear itself, vengeance, and it was hungry. The wreckage drifted silent across the black sky, twisted metal glowing faintly with the heat of battle corpses of machines and broken ships floating like ghosts in the void, yet in the heart of the human vessel, there was no silence, there was fire. Not only the fire of engines and sparking wires, but the fire in the eyes of every survivor who had stood against an empire and lived. Kale walked the bridge slowly, his boots echoing on the steel floor. Each crew member rising from their seat as his shadow passed. Their faces were bruised, their hands burned, their clothes torn, yet their eyes shone with something new. It was not relief. It was not simple survival. It was something sharper, darker, and stronger. It was pride they had seen themselves, not as hunted prey, but as predators striking back, and they would never forget the taste of it. But Kale did not celebrate. He stood at the center of the bridge and stared into the stars, silent and cold. He knew the truth. This was only the first. The real war was still ahead, and it would not forgive the humans for daring to resist. As he thought, the communications panel sparked alive. A voice filled the chamber, not a human voice, but one carried with arrogance and steel. It was a message, broadcast across the system in every direction. The words meant to be heard, not just by Kale's crew, but by every ship and world listening nearby. It declared humanity a threat. It called them dangerous vermin who had broken the natural order of the galaxy. It promised that fleets would gather, armies would rise, and fire would fall until Earth and every colony of man was reduced to ash. The crew shifted nervously at the words. Yet Kale only tightened his fists and raised his head. His voice cut through the tension. When they come, we will not hide when they come. We will make them remember who we are. His words fell heavy into every chest, and something changed in the crew. Fear still lived in them, but now it was chained behind something. Stronger determination. That night the humans worked without rest, patching hulls, welding plates, salvaging from the enemy wrecks. They pulled alien weapons from the corpses of ships, studied their systems, tore apart their secrets, and made them their own. Kale ordered every gun reworked, every engine pushed beyond design, every weakness sealed with sweat and blood. He spoke little, but his presence drove them like a storm, always watching, always demanding, always pushing, because he knew hesitation was death within days. The humans were not the same crew who had stumbled from hiding. They were harder, sharper, more ruthless. They turned the two broken warships into wolves, armored and armed beyond what even the empires expected. Then came the whispers, scouts moving again, spies hidden in the wreckage, signals bouncing between stars. Kale knew the enemy was gathering larger than before, but something inside him wanted them to come. He wanted them to see what humanity had become when pressed against extinction. And so when the fleet finally arrived, the humans did not retreat. They charged the first shots, shook the void. The second wave carved into the enemy like fire through dry wood. And this time it was different. The humans fought, with rage but also with stolen knowledge, alien weapons twisted into their own hands, defenses upgraded with salvaged technology tactics designed to exploit weaknesses the empires thought untouchable. The void became a storm lit by explosions and screams, but at the center of the storm, Kale stood unflinching, guiding his crew through the chaos. One enemy ship crumbled, then another, until the fleet that came to crush humanity instead fell silent in flames, the survivors fleeing, broken and terrified into the stars the humans had done what no prey was meant to do. They had turned the hunters into the hunted when the battle ended. The crew stood in stunned silence, breathing heavy, staring at the wreckage around them. They were alive again. They had won again. But this victory felt different, heavier, because they knew now the galaxy would never stop. The empires would come again and again, with more ships, with more armies, with more hate. Kale stood tall among them, and his voice broke the silence. Let them come, for every battle we win is another scar in their pride. For every scar we carve is another reason they will fear us across the stars. And as his words echoed through the steel halls, the crew erupted in a roar, not just of survival, not just of pride, but of hunger. Hunger for more battles, more victories, more proof that humanity was no longer prey, but something darker, something stronger, something the galaxy would soon learn to fear. Kale turned back, to the stars, his eyes like stone. And in the silence of his heart, he knew the path before them was endless. A war without end. A war that would burn galaxies. And yet, he felt no hesitation. For the first time, he allowed himself a thin, sharp smile. Because humanity had finally found its place in the stars, not as prey, but as nightmare. The stars stretched endless and silent above, yet to the humans who stared at them from their battered warships, the silence no longer felt empty. It felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Kale stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, as reports came in from every direction. Enemy scouts destroyed, enemy transmissions, intercepted whispers of growing fleets in nearby systems. Every empire was stirring, and all of them had one focus: humanity. Kale listened without moving his mind, calculating every risk, every possibility, until his second officer dared to speak aloud. "Captain, how long until they strike?" Kale turned slowly, his eyes dark and calm. "Not long." The words were simple, but they fell like thunder into the hearts of everyone present still. No one flinched. They had tasted fear. They had swallowed it and turned it into steel. They were no longer the same crew who had once fled in desperation. They were soldiers now, forged by fire and loss and vengeance. That night, Kale gathered his officers in the war room, a crude table lit by dim screens and maps of the stars projected above them. Glowing red dots showed enemy movements, whole fleets, shifting in their direction. Kyle's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold. "They believe we will run. They believe we will scatter into the dark. But we will not run, and we will not scatter. We will strike first." His officers looked at him in silence, some with disbelief, some with awe. "Strike first, sir, against fleets larger than ours." Kyle leaned forward, his gaze burning. "They have size, but we have teeth. They have numbers, but we have fire. They think us prey, but they do not understand. Prey can learn to bite, and once it learns, it never stops." The silence grew heavier. The officers knew the risk, but they also knew there was no other path. Kale had already decided. And when Kyle decided there was no turning back, preparations began at once. The humans tore deeper into the wreckage of fallen ships, pulling apart alien reactors, twisting their technology into new weapons. They were reckless. They were desperate. But they were brilliant engines that once ran on alien cores now roared with human firepower. Railguns lined the hulls. Cannons bristled like teeth. Shields rebuilt from stolen parts shimmered like phantom walls. The humans were becoming something unrecognizable even to themselves. Kyle walked through the shipyards watching. Sparks shower across steel plates, watching exhausted engineers sleep beside their stations, only to rise and work again. There was no comfort, no safety, no future promised, only war. But war was enough for them now when the first fleet appeared on the edge of human space. Kale was waiting. The crew stood at battle stations, silent, their hearts pounding, not with fear but with hunger. The enemy outnumbered them 3-1, their ships gleaming polished perfect like a parade meant to intimidate. But Kale only gave a single command strike. The human ships roared forward faster than the enemy expected, like wolves breaking from shadows. Their first volley tore through the front lines, ripping ships apart before the enemy had time to raise. Shields the void lit up with fire. The battle exploded into chaos. Humans fighting with fury, precision, and ruthlessness. Every move calculated, every weakness targeted. The enemy believed they had cornered vermin. Instead, they had unleashed monsters. Kale moved like a predator, his commands sharp, guiding his ships through the chaos, weaving destruction into the fleet with every strike. Explosions shook the stars, fire rained across the void, screams echoed over comms, and for the first time, the enemy faltered ships breaking formation, captains shouting in confusion. Prey was not supposed to fight like this. Prey was not supposed to win, but the humans did. They tore the fleet apart piece by piece until wreckage floated in silence around. Them another impossible victory etched into the stars when the last ship fled. Kale stood unmoving, staring into the battlefield. His crew erupted in cheers, voices breaking with triumph, fists slamming against steel, but Kale's face remained carved. From stone he knew what this meant. Every victory drew more eyes. Every scar they carved into the galaxy's pride would bring larger fleets, greater fury, endless war. His second officer stepped beside him. "Captain, they will never stop." Kale's lips curved into something cold and thin. "Good, then neither will we." The words hung in the air like prophecy, heavy and unyielding. The crew fell silent, their eyes fixed on him, understanding the truth. There was no going back. Humanity had crossed a line. They could never return from they had shed the skin of prey and become something darker, something untamed, something unstoppable. Kyle raised his gaze to the endless stars, and for the first time he spoke not to his crew, not to his enemies, but to the galaxy itself. "You wanted us weak, you wanted us silent, you wanted us gone, but now you will learn what it means to fear us." His words faded into the silence.